So, Richard Knutson here, and welcome to session 3, which I call Building a Goal-Oriented CRM. What we're going to do in this session, it's session 3 of the What's New in CRM 2011 webinar series, is talk about what I think is one of the most important and interesting new features in Dynamic CRM 2011, and it's brand new. If you haven't seen this before, I know from experience that it looks like something you haven't seen before at first, and I'll try to demystify this a little bit. So just background information on me. I'm the VP of the CRM practice here at Magenium Solutions, and as some of you know, I've been here a total of 6 weeks now after 20 plus years running my own show at my old company, and so far so good. They still seem to like me here at Magenium, so that's a good thing. The information at the bottom of the screen, so my blog, the dynamiccrmtrickbag.com. I post all of these sessions after they're recorded up there, along with accompanying articles. There's my contact information down there. And here's what I'm going to talk about today. I've touched on some of these topics in some of the previous sessions, but not in as much detail as I will here. And in this session in particular, what I really want to drill down is this very first one, metrics and goals. And what I want to do is everything else that I'll talk about today, we will talk about some other, so the charts and dashboards, which you can certainly do in Dynamic CRM 2011 independently of metrics and goals, but I'm going to talk about them in reference to metrics and goals, because they are, I think, particularly useful when used in conjunction with metrics and goals. And then I kind of want to have some discussion about how these new features would impact your CRM, and in particular kind of the planning and the things you might want to do to put yourself in a position to take advantage of these, because they're definitely important new features, but they take a little bit of investment in terms of sort of, this is more on the business process and planning and design and those kinds of things. This isn't necessarily a technical issue, because it's the sort of thing that with a relatively small amount of investment, you can figure out how these things work, but then there's some impact on the kinds of information that you might want to be tracking in CRM to take advantage of it, and the business processes you need. And hopefully you'll see what I mean by this. So, what metrics and goals do collectively is they really provide a foundation for you to define goals and track progress against them for really a couple scenarios. For any currency or numeric field in a dynamic CRM record type, entity, or a count of records satisfying certain criteria. Now, I know that probably sounds pretty bland, but what that really means is if you can figure out a way to put something into a CRM record, you can make a goal for it and track progress against it. So take something like the first little section here, this type of activity counts, and you'll see what I mean by this. I'm going to mainly go through the examples today in marketing and sales context, but these things are general. They work for any functional area in Dynamic CRM, so service scheduling, or any kind of XRM area, any custom entities. Goals can be used for all of those things. So you can think of a sort of a broad type of goals and activity count. In marketing, some examples of those might be things like the number of qualified leads by a time period, by month, or the number of opportunities that you generated from campaigns, so tying those back to a marketing campaign. Some examples of activity count type goals in sales, maybe things like completed phone calls for a sales rep, or outgoing emails, or appointments. Maybe you've got in progress, of scheduled appointments versus completed appointments, things like that. If those are the kinds of things, obviously those are just examples. Now, there's another type of goal, and we'll look at examples of all of these in a couple minutes. This is probably the most obvious one, sort of a revenue goal. And you could think of different functional areas having different revenue goals, right? Marketing maybe has a revenue goal. Maybe you might want to generate opportunity revenue where that opportunity revenue was of a specific type. It's from an opportunity that was generated from a lead. Maybe that marketing had something to do with creating. Or how about revenue that ties back to a marketing campaign? So those would be examples of revenue goals specifically having to do with marketing. On the sales side, this would be the classic, individual revenue goals for a sales rep, say, or how about team or all-up revenue? Business line, product, department, territory, any kind of slice of your sales data you could track with a revenue goal in the scenario that I'm going to show you here in this functional area. And what a new feature area especially one as broad as this, introduces, you always have this new kind of taxonomy, right? How we refer to things. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this, and then I'll show you some examples that hopefully will clarify it. There really are three new underlying components or entities. These are actual record types. So goal metric, you'll see in a minute, we'll go to Dynamic CRM 2011, and there's a new record type for a goal metric. And what this does, this is a foundation component, and what the goal metric lets you define is you really define the record type and field underlying the goal. So the record type is going to be something like, is it a count? Is it a revenue number? Is it some other numeric field? And what's the entity, the record type underneath the goal? So, for example, the examples might be opportunity record type and the field into estimated revenue or actual revenue for in progress and our actual indicators. And I'll take you through an example of that. That's the goal metric. When we define a goal, that's going to be based on the goal metric, but the goal is really where all the action is. This is the specific thing that somebody's feet are held to the fire for. So a goal is going to have a name, so it might be something like my sales for Q4 2010. It's going to rely on a metric, so sales in this case. It'll have an owner, and it'll have a time period. So it's always defined specifically with respect to a time period, and it'll have a target, that $100,000 in this example. I'll show you how that works in a second. Then you got this roll-up query, and you don't always need these. These things are a little bit tricky. I'll show you a couple of examples where you might use those. The thing about the roll-up queries is you only need them if the owner of the goal record is not the same necessarily as the owner of all the records that are going to roll up and contribute to it. So an example of that would be a team. If you want to assign a goal to a team, but the records that you want to contribute to the actual and in progress values aren't necessarily owned by the team. That's a pretty good one. Now, again, I'll show you some demos of this in a second. You'll see how this stuff works. I think it'll be clear when we look at it. For me, it helped to visualize these things by looking at this. There's a built-in chart that comes with the goal record type in Dynamic CRM 2011. It's referred to as goal progress, and this is the goal progress money variety for goals that are based on a currency field. And the way it works is, you can see it here. Each cluster of data points here, these all represent one record. These are all goal records. So goal records have owners. They always have a time period that the goal and the targets are tracked for. And there's I think of sort of three data points for each goal. There's a target value, that's the blue in this case. And then there's two calculated fields, actual and in progress. So if your goals can be expressed in this kind of scenario here, where you've got a target that you're shooting for, and then you have actual and in progress values, that's really the only real requirement for goals to work in this scenario. So what you'll see here, and I'll show you this in a minute in the demo, a good way to kind of continue with this exercise, visualizing goals, is you can see here what I've done is I've navigated to the goals record types, or so-called entity, and I selected a view. Notice the view that's selected here is My Active Goals. What you'll see on the right-hand side here is that the charts in the chart area are going to they'll automatically reflect the underlying view that's been selected. So in this case, I've got My Active Goals, and I can make it so that the goal progress chart automatically apply to those. I'll show you that in a second. So a couple of examples, and then we'll do a demo, and hopefully you'll get a feel for this. Dynamic CRM 2011 does come with some pre-configured goal metrics. So those things are generic. There's one in particular called sales, and it specifies the goal as type of money, so it basically specifies the data type for the goal. It specifies the record type, that's opportunity, and it points to the estimated revenue field. So that's the field that the goal is going to be created for, which makes sense, kind of a common sense definition of sales in Dynamic CRM. And it goes a little bit further, and it defines actual and in progress values. So actual is going to be opportunities that have a status of 1 and a close date within the period the goal is defined for. And similarly for in progress, except a different status value, open opportunities, with an estimated close date within a period. So when we create a new goal record, an example might be something like this. You need to come up with naming conventions for these things too, by the way. And that, I think, would probably be, those are going to be organization specific, but there probably are some conventions that, that will make sense to use in kind of a generic sense. And I'll talk about some of these as we go. So I might name a goal record Q4 sales for Alan. It's always going to have a metric, in this case sales. It's going to have an owner. Goals will always be owned, in this case by a user. So the scenario here is Alan's an individual sales rep. You can create goals for a fiscal period or for a custom period, so it's pretty flexible as far as that goes. I'll show you how that works too. So this one may be Q4 2010. It's going to have a target value, and it'll have what's referred to, and this is kind of the tricky part, I think, at least it was for me, that record set for roll-up, and I'll show you what I mean by this. This is an example of an easy one, and I'll show you, you'll see in a second why that is, because the record set for the roll-up is the same as the owner. And I'll show you a sort of a contrasting example of that here in example 2. So here's where we have to do that third component, that's that optional component, the roll-up query. And this scenario here is I want records to roll up that aren't necessarily owned by the owner of the goal. That's when you need a roll-up query. So we'll do the same example. So we'll use the same sales goal metric. But here what we're going to do is create a new goal record. Some similar characteristics, only this isn't for a person's sales. This is maybe for a product line or a business line. So let's say Q4 sales for mountain bikes. I'll use the AdventureWorks sample database to show this. Goal metric of sales still. Now the goal owner, it could be Alan, it could be a user, or it could be the sales team. In CRM2011 you can assign records to teams now. So I might assign this to the sales team. Maybe it's a shared goal. Still have a fiscal period, still have a target value, but here, that last little thing, the record set for roll-up, this is going to specify a different query. This is not going to be, it's not going to be sufficient to define this one as owner, right? Because somebody could create, in the AdventureWorks scenario, maybe any of the sales reps could create an opportunity or be assigned an opportunity with a business line value. So here we have to work a little bit more, and I'll show you an example of this here. So I'm going to show you 3 things in this first demo. First, I'm going to show you a little bit of visualization with this, just so you can kind of see. Yeah. Yep. Question?
Richard, quick question. That query, is that a SQL query?
This here? No. This is these.
Yeah, the roll-up query.
Yep.
Is that a SQL query?
No, this is just meant to be heuristic. Yeah, and I'll show you how we create those. No doubt under the covers somewhere.
Leveraging SQL.
Yes. Oh yeah. The database that's underneath Dynamics CRM 2011 is a SQL Server database. Yep. And you could. I'll show you yep. No problem. If we have time, I'll show you a little example at the end where you can use, say, SQL Server reporting services and create custom reports that go up against this foundation. Okay? Okay.